Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Great, great. Very good. I hope you had a good night's sleep, or I don't know, when you're sleeping, Dantachita, you're always here, slightly concerning, and you're always looking so bright and positive. So I want whatever you've got. It's very inspiring. And Amladana's here. Well done, Amladana, for making it. I had to sort of slightly bully Amladana into coming on the retreat, and well done, well done. That's good. Vacha with your mug of tea. And Kusla, who are you? Savannah Jyoti with your headphones, that's very good. Hello. Very good to see you all. Sangaji in the open air. That's not a green screen, that's really you, isn't it? That's very good, with your shades. And Arta Kuslim, welcome Arta Kuslim, lovely to see you, lovely to have you on the retreat. Very, very good, all of you. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel like I'm on retreat. I hope that's happening for you at home. I hope that the conditions around you are sort of supporting the process as we go deeper. Personally, it's very lovely being at Adhisthana. I was this morning walking around, thank you, Sadlika, this circumambulating Bhante's burial mound. And it's so, so beautiful. I mean, all the flowers are in bloom. I wouldn't have thought in September they would be so lush and fecund, and it just looks so exquisite. And yeah, I just had a very sort of lovely sense of, well, remembering Bhante, a sense of his presence and a sense of recalling him, feeling a lot of gratitude. So very lovely being here. I hope that wherever you are, the conditions are, you know, at least not distracting you too much from being on retreat. Okay, so I'm going to make a start. So today, this morning, we are going to start looking at prajna, and particularly the lakshana of impermanence, anicca or anitya. And I think, first of all, I want to say something a bit more general about prajna, about the lakshanas, and then I'll say something about impermanence, and then we'll meditate, trying to go deeper into seeing the truth of impermanence in our actual direct experience. Then, as we did yesterday, there'll be, I think we'll have a little break, and then a Q&A, and then another meditation. Okay, so that'll take us till just before lunchtime here, anyway, UK time. So prajna, oh goodness, I don't know what to say. I hope you'll bear with me. I've got lots and lots of thoughts, and they're all slightly tangled. So the first thing I guess I want to say is that we can't leave samadhi behind. We have to be connected, I believe, with Shraddha, particularly with Shraddha, but also with metta, if we're going to really experience prajna. We can't leave samadhi behind. You know, the caveats, all Maitreya Bandhu was saying last night, notwithstanding, what I'm going to encourage us to do is just get in touch with as much Shraddha, with as much faith as we can. The opening words of the Ratnaguna Samtrayagata come to mind, of call forth as much of love, of faith, and of reverence as you can. Without that, I don't think it's really wisdom, at least not in its fullness, that we'll experience. I was, Yes, so maybe me and Maitreya Bandhu won't keep emphasizing metta and prajna, and metta and shraddha, mainly because we've got so much that we want to say about the lakshanas and about the myths and we're assuming that you'll stay in touch with positive emotion in all the practices. During the day, some of the practices that we're doing, we're sort of leaving relatively open. And I'd sort of advise really making sure that you work with the heart in all of the practices, whether we're focusing on the lakshanas or whatever we're doing. Yeah, and particularly for me anyway, when I'm meditating, whether I'm doing my sadhana or formless meditation or a bhavana practice or whatever, I try and do it in the presence of Manjughosha, of my yidam. I try and bring Manjughosha to mind, to heart. For me, that contextual, it makes sense of everything. So I don't know what the equivalent for you is, what works for you, but I just encourage you to stay in touch with Shraddha. Without that, I think that what we easily slip into is nihilism, more or less subtle nihilism. That's what we slip into. I was thinking this morning about prajna and the sort of fact that Bhante emphasized, if you remember, that the lakshanas open the doors to the samadhis, the transcendental samadhis. And in the case of anicca, it's the animitta samadhi, the signless samadhi. The samadhi is the fruit of the lakshana. The lakshana, the reflection, is merely there to open the door that we can then step through. If we don't step through the door, or if the door doesn't open, we can reflect on impermanence or insubstantiality or dukkha as much as we like, and it won't work. Do you remember, I was thinking of Philip Pullman's trilogy, the Dark Materials, his Dark Materials trilogy. And the second novel in that trilogy is called The Subtle Knife. And one of the characters has this knife, this magic knife, that if you wield it correctly, you can cut through the air, you can cut a window into another world, into a parallel universe, into another world. But you have to wield the knife correctly, otherwise it won't cut the window. Or worse, it cuts yourself. If you don't wield the knife correctly, it'll become a weapon of destruction, something damaging. And I think insight reflections are a bit like that subtle knife. We have to wield them correctly in order to open the door, open the window into the samadhi that then leads us into this transcendental world. This other world, this dimension beyond me and you, subject and object, time and space. It opens up that, but only if it's wielded correctly. And one of the tools that we need for wielding it correctly is shraddha, that there is this other dimension. I think one of the issues that we're facing in the Dharma life is that we're in this dualistic framework of me and world, subject and object, and we assume that the world out there is real as we perceive it, and that I'm real in here. We assume that that's the case. We're trying to go beyond that duality. We're told by all Dharma teachings that there is a beyond this duality. But what happens is that we either fall into assuming that the transcendental realm beyond this dualistic realm is somehow objectively out there, independent of me and independent of mind, in which case we've fallen into eternalism, or we assume that there's nothing beyond me and my mind. We fall back onto subjectivity. in which case we fall into nihilism. The world, even this world of stuff, of cameras and screens, part of the teaching of conditioned existence is that it's not objective. It's not just that it's all flowing, which it is, but it's not completely objective. It's partly mind-made. Part of the conditioning is mind. The opening verses of the Dhammapada, all experiences are led by mind, produced by mind, created by mind, etc., etc. It's mind that is the key that leads to the experience that we have. And so what am I getting at? I'm trying to get at, therefore, the state of our mind will condition what we experience when we reflect on the lakshanas. Whether a transcendental dimension opens up in all its beauty and wonder or not will depend at least partly on the state of our mind. And if we bring shraddha, if we bring reverence, garava, if we bring maitri to our experience, the world opens up. We know that, don't we? Bhante's emphasized again and again the importance of beauty. The importance of beauty. One of the reasons I believe that he's emphasized that is that the experience of beauty is neither completely objective nor completely subjective. Do you see it co-arises? So this morning I'm walking around Bhante's burial mound and it was exquisitely beautiful. Yesterday I was doing the same thing and frankly my heart didn't open. And it's the same flowers, as it were. Of course they're not, but you know what I mean. My mind was different. My heart was different. So beauty, we're used to accepting that beauty is neither completely subjective or objective, that it's really hard to talk about. Philosophers have, of aesthetics have tried to grapple with what beauty is for centuries, and there's no, as far as I know, anyway, I'm not a philosopher, but there's no consensus. You see, it evades this common sense notion of an objective out there world, independent of my mind and what I bring to it. Part of what I was talking about in terms of secular materialism is this assumption that the world out there is completely as it appears. Now, the unconditioned, the transcendental realm, it too is empty of any substantial existence, which means it too must be partly determined by the mind. I think that this is what the Mahayana is saying. The Mahayana comes up with image after image after image, rich profusion of endless unfolding images of the wonder of this transcendental realm. Imaginative images, because it's the realm of imagination that will experience it. Whereas the danger for us in the West is that we somehow, very, very subtly perhaps, assume that we don't need all of that metaphysical nonsense of the Mahayana, this mythic language, this that all we need to do is reflect on shunyata, or reflect on impermanence, as we're about to do. And the truth will reveal itself as if the truth were an objective reality, independent of the mind that I bring. And it's just not like that. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense. Nod. Yes, Abhayavacha's nodding. I'll take that as a great. So for example, anicca, impermanence, we can take in all sorts of ways, can't we? Western poets from, however long ago, centuries, and particularly the Romantics, have talked and celebrated the fact of impermanence, the poignancy of impermanence, the beauty of impermanence, the heart-opening, sort of heart-melting truth of the fragility of human life. All of that's been, we kind of know that. We've got a rich culture of that. And it can have value, that. It can have value if we can be moved by impermanence, if we can be moved by the fleetingness of our human condition. That can have a heart-opening effect. Of course, you see that if there isn't enough positivity, it just has a depressing effect. It just leads to despondency, even a sense of despair. But if we approach it with metta, then what can happen is a sense of meaning and beauty opens up. I can. Recently I saw a little news clip of a woman who had lost her house in the wildfires that are raging in California. These wildfires are apparently several times more catastrophic than they ever have been. And she was standing, just being interviewed, and she was weeping uncontrollably, saying, "This is all I've got. I managed to get some papers out of my house, and that's it. The clothes she was standing in were all that she had, and she said, 'This is all I've got.'" And very, very moving, just a little 2-minute clip of this sort of, for me, I'm such a sort of homebody. I love my home. I love the people around. I can't imagine losing all of that in an instant like that. I can't imagine what that's like. And I felt very moved by that. And it caused me to reflect. And one of the reflections that came to mind was that I remember some years ago, I was on leading a newcomers retreat, and I met a woman who, as I often do, I say, "What brought you to Buddhism? What brought you to the retreat?" etc., etc. And she said, "Oh, my house burnt down." And it had, fortunately, she and nobody had been harmed, but there'd been a fire, and she'd lost everything. And for her, what she was saying is that had freed her. She said she didn't want to go back to the life that she had. It had opened up a new way of life, and that had led to the Dharma. And now the Dharma was opening up for her. Anyway, I was just reminded of the poignancy of those two stories of impermanence. I was also reflecting on death. I mean, I like reflecting on death. The Dharma encourages us to reflect on death from, probably every Dharma teacher. The Buddha encouraged reflection on death. Padmasambhava, his advice to Queen Yanchung starts with the lines, pay urgent attention to impermanence. Milarepa reflects on death. Anyway, I enjoy reflecting on death, and on the whole, partly it motivates me, and I need all the motivation, believe me, that I can get, because I'm so prone to just comfort. I have a fairly comfortable life, and given the choice, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy practice, but I also enjoy lying around in bed and watching YouTube and whatever. I need a kick up the bum, as it were, every so often, and reflecting on impermanence, particularly on death, does that. It's a motivating teaching to get on with it, to get on with practice. But it can take us deeper. When my mother died in 2000 and, oh goodness, I've forgotten the date. Anyway, she died about 2011, sorry. She died in 2011. Unexpected. Well, she was 74, and she had lots of ailments, but she didn't have anything terminal, so it was sort of unexpected. I was on a solitary retreat, so I wasn't there. I was out in Dukaloka, and yeah, they had to come and tell me. Nandaraja and not Nandaraja, what's his name? Mani Raja. who himself has now died. And Vajrabandhu came and told me. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that in amongst the shock and the grief and for the next few months, I think for about 3 months, I was catapulted into an ecstatic state. It was one of the most positive, extended positive periods of my whole life following my mother's death. And I'm not going to try and unpack it all. Partly, I was pleased that she was free of the body. She wasn't afraid of dying, and she had died in a very peaceful, beautiful way. So that was very heartening. But it was more than that. And she'd meditated for the last 30 odd years of her life. And her last conversation, she'd said to me, she'd said, if you have a true spiritual life, how can you be afraid of death? She was referring not to me, but to one of her family, one of her siblings, who she felt was afraid of death. But also I was catapulted into this realm of meaning. I don't know if you've had that when you've been bereaved, if you've been bereaved, whether you suddenly, all the trivialities of all the normal preoccupations of my life were trivial compared to this fact of death. It felt like I had entered into the world of death. I felt her presence a lot. I mean, I referred to my father on the other evening. Well, the same with my mother. I felt her presence. I felt an enormous amount of love. I felt similarly when Bante died. I was catapulted into, well, many of us were, into a world of meaning and gratitude and a sense that there's more. Even a sense of wonder and real gratitude that I had a path that led to meaning, led to truth, led to reality. In contrast, I have got a large extended family on my mother's side, and they had varying degrees of grief, but one of her siblings, one of my uncles, was so unable to come to terms with my mother's death that for years afterwards, he's no longer alive himself now, but for years afterwards, he was unable to really talk to me or my sister because we reminded him too much of my mother. And he almost sort of cut off from us out of grief. So there you go, this truth of death. Do you see the mind that we bring to it either opens a door or condemns us to despair. And the door that it opens, the realm that opens up, can't be categorized as either subjective or objective. It's reality beyond all those ways of categorizing. And if we approach it with faith, it'll be beautiful. So look for beauty. I think that impermanence and beauty are so linked. And Bante was so wise in emphasizing beauty to us as a path and drawing that out when it had been lost at least from early Buddhism. Okay, so in the meditation, what I'd like us to do, outside of meditation, let's see if we can just reflect on impermanence in whatever way feels appropriate for you, whether that's death or whether it's a simple thing like reflecting on the day that's gone. Yesterday it's gone. You could contemplate the experiences that you had on the day before, including the states of mind that you experienced, the meditations, etc., and it's gone. So that would be one way of reflecting outside of meditation. I'd really encourage us to keep that in mind. Look for beauty in what you find in those reflections. Death is the mother of beauty. Is that Wallace Stevens? Death is the mother of beauty. look for beauty. In meditation, what we're going to do is take a more closer, almost forensic look. That's what I'm going to encourage us to do at the moment-to-moment changing experience of, well, I'm going to suggest it can be any of our experience, but I'm going to suggest it's the body. So well, I mean, it could be any of the Lakshana, not the Lakshanas, any of the skandhas, for example, that we pay attention to. It could be the body, but it could be Vedana, it could be, what are the other skandhas? You know, chitta, mind. It could be our emotional state. It could be our thoughts. But what I'm asking us to do is notice our experience in a moment-to-moment way, with a background reflection, looking for change. This is change. So notice the changing moment-to-moment sensations. So we'll, in a way, we'll start with the body and its sensations. You can either focus on a particular sensation. Sometimes it might be, like if there is a prominent sensation, like a pain in the body, it is possible to look at it in this way. And rather than assume that we know what pain feels like, really, really pay attention to the fluctuations. So for example, I've got a slight ache in my knee, and if I pay attention to it and don't dismiss it and don't sort of turn away with aversion from it, if I pay attention, it's actually it's a sort of pulsating, throbbing warmth. There's a sort of vibrating kind of energy to it. But you don't have to focus on pain. To do that, you do need more metta. You could just focus on any sensation. Of course, you could do the breath, or any sensation in the body, or indeed the whole space of the body. You could just watch the sort of trembling, fluctuating, vibrating sensations moment to moment as they arise and pass. They're too quick to sort of say arise and pass. There's just this sort of energetic vibrating. It's like the body dissolves into a mass of energy that's constantly vibrating. You could look for that if you want to. Not in a strained way, not in a way that says you've got to focus on follow each moment of change, because if you try and do that, you'll probably strain your attention, your mind. In a relaxed way, see if we can stay watching the moment-to-moment sensations. Of course, we'll probably get distracted, or if you're like me, you'll probably get distracted. Well, that's okay. You can either come back to the body, or you can include the distraction in this awareness of change. So the distraction, whatever your thought train is, that too is moment-to-moment changing. There is nothing stable or still there. So you can, or you might hear some sounds. I'll ring the bell, but wherever you are, you might be hearing sounds around you. Again, you can look for just the moment-to-moment fluctuating quality of the sound as vibration. So although I'm saying let's focus on the body and its sensations, the Vedana, you don't have to ignore sound or thought or emotion if you want to. The main thing is that we're looking at our experience through the lens of anitya, of impermanence. And what you'll know if this is working as a Lakshana reflection, because there will be a sense of release or ease or well-being that arises, greater or lesser extent, a sense of ease, a sense of letting go, a sense that there's nothing to hold on to and so we can relax, a sense of spaciousness opening up, and possibly a sense of wonder. The animitta samadhi, the signless samadhi, I think is signless because you know, all labels drop away, all concepts drop away, and what you're left with is wonder and beauty, perhaps. So look for those positive qualities, and if you notice a sense of ease, well-being, relaxing, beauty, wonder, sort of encourage that, go with that. If, on the other hand, what you notice is a sense of tightening, a sense of unease, dis-ease, fear, despondency, whatever, something, then back off a bit and let's bring some more metta and shraddha into play. Yeah. I don't think I need to say any more. Hopefully that's clear enough. So I'll lead us into the meditation with a brief body awareness. We'll meditate for about 40 minutes. Do you need a 5-minute, 2-minute leg stretch or anything? Let's have a couple of minutes just to stretch our legs if you need to before we settle. Okay, so settling back down. So I'll also be reading from Tsongkhapa, his words on the human body. So making sure you're comfortable. Maybe starting with a few deeper breaths. And tuning into the sounds you can hear around you. My voice, of course, but other sounds you might hear. Without commentary, just noticing the sensation of sound. how it keeps changing moment to moment. And bringing awareness into the body. Combing through the body with your awareness, easing any areas of tension or tightness or holding on. Also turning towards the heart. Allowing the heart to soften. Perhaps bringing to mind something that moves you. Connects you with the fragility of human life. And having an overall sense of the body and its sensations. The energy in the body. Connecting with a sense of Shraddha. There is more. And in your experience of the body, beginning to note change, moment to moment change, either in one particular part of the body or in the space of the whole body. This human body at peace with itself, is rare, is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body. It is yours this one time only. This human form is one with difficulty. It is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. This life you must know as the tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal. Make use of every day and night to achieve it. Beginning to let go of effort, just sitting for a little bit longer. This human body, at peace with itself, is more precious than the rarest gem. Cherish your body. It is yours this one time only. The human form is one with difficulty. It is easy to lose. All worldly things are brief, like lightning in the sky. This life, you must know, as the tiny splash of a raindrop, a thing of beauty that disappears even as it comes into being. Therefore, set your goal. Make use of every day and night to achieve it. Okay, so let's have a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. Maitreya Bandhu will join me and we'll see if there are any questions or things that you want to explore more. Okay, see you in a bit. We unmuted. Can you hear us? Good. Okay, good. Welcome back. So, my friend who's joined us on the platform, and so you might have anything that's arisen from, this morning, or from last night, or well, from whenever really. Anything you'd like to ask more about, and if there is anything, you could just raise your hand. We've also got a question. Bodhiketu, who's in the shrine room, wants to ask something, so perhaps I'll turn to Bodhiketu first, and see what Bodhiketu's question is, and if you can't hear it, I'll repeat it. Bodhiketu.
So I want to ask something about what you were saying about Sila Samadhi Prajna from last night. My whole spiritual life, I've had quite a strong facility for Samadhi, Jnana. And that's not just beginner's mind, it's continued and deepened all the way through. And I don't think I'm not any more ethical than anyone else around me. So it's been something that I find curious. And one of the conclusions I suppose I've come to is that Sila Samadhi Prajna are more like three parallel interrelated strands of training without any particular hierarchy. And you kind of intimated a bit about that last night, sort of feedback, but I wanted to get a sense from you about that. What do you comment on that, and whether you think that that sort of facility is more temperamental? I mean, the only thing I can really trace it to is the fact that on my mum's side of the family there's a strong history of religious and artistic mysticism. But yeah, so is there any hierarchy at all in Sila Samadhi Prajna?
Gosh, do you want to repeat the question? Answer it.
So really, is there any hierarchy really in Sila Samadhi Prajna? And is it three different sort of lines of training? Interrelated trainings, and what is about the temperamental issues? My answer is I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is, Bhante used to always say that there's no such thing as a temperamentally someone who can meditate, isn't it? I remember it in various places, but that's not been my experience. He used to emphasize that there's not a meditation temperament. But some people, from what I can see, do seem to have a facility for meditation, and even for very deep meditation experiences. I definitely don't. I've never had. And I've, from the other end, wondered why that is, and is it to do with my Sila? And of course, as I said last night, Sila is kind of infinite as well. You can never say you've finished Sila and can move on to Samadhi. My sense is that they're hyphenated together, as I said, in some way. Certainly, I think, all I could say, I think perhaps Jnanavaca might say more, but because I don't really know, but all I feel strongly is that any prajna experience will lead to a new Sila. And that if it doesn't, then I struggle to believe it's a prajna experience. It might be a deep experience, even a shocking experience, but I struggle to think that it's a prajna one. I don't know. But anything that is deeply experienced changes one's behavior. If it doesn't change your behavior, I struggle with that. There's that classic sutra where the king tries to trick the Buddha into saying, "Who are these arahants?" And he parades all these monks in front of him, and the Buddha just said, "I don't know. I'd have to live with them for a long time. I'd have to see them in ups and downs. So really, I'd have to see their behavior over a long period of times, where they have good times and bad times." And of course, what you find out in the sutra is the king's courtiers disguised as monks. It's a trick. So certainly I think that any prajna, at least in principle, should change behavior. I've not seen anyone that I feel has deep experiences dharmically that doesn't lead to, for instance, to gratitude, to a sense of I've been given so much. My own experience, limited experience, is that any prajna experience is always more than you deserve. It's like a free gift. It's like you've done nothing. You've been given all this, and then you've got even more than you deserve, if you see what I mean. So that always seems to be the emotional tenor of any breakthrough that I can see. Have you? Yes. Yes, I think spiritual life can take you. I mean, Bhante's talked about this in seminar where some Christian mystics end up outside of their tradition because it's just taken them so far, a sort of undeserved, a kind of unwanted, unwilled element. But I think you're right. I think there seems to me, some people do have a temperament. I don't know whether it's temperament or happenstance that opens meditation up to them. I think partly as well is once you think you can do it, you can do it. I think your view creates your experience. So I think early on, if you think meditation is something you can do, you'll have experiences that confirm that, which will tend to open you up to it again. I tended very early on to think meditation was something I couldn't do, and that kept getting confirmed as well. I think probably those early views that you come in with, which are temperamental, form the experiences you have and then confirm themselves. I think that's one of the big issues with all of this is that the view that is in you, running through you, tends to confirm itself. So, literally, if you have a subtle sense that you probably can't meditate, you'll keep on seeing confirmation for that, which will back up the view, and the view gets stronger. The experience confirms that the view gets stronger. I think the same probably for if you feel you can. You'll keep on noticing the experiences that seem to confirm that, and you'll get more of it. The question is how you then break out of an unhelpful view and how you see the limitations even in a helpful one. Because I have seen people who can get very deeply into meditation who seem, I don't think this is a view, but who seem very deep but very narrow, who seem to be spending all their spiritual money on themselves, which is where they've got a very deep, rich core, but it doesn't seem to benefit others very much. And I'd have questions about that. Whether you
The other thing I'd perhaps say, I agree with what you've said, and the only thing I'd sort of particularly add is that there seem to be different ways into prajna as well, and samadhi as absorption is obviously one of them, and the classic one, as it were. But people seem to have had breakthroughs through intensity of reflection or intensity of life experience. Presumably there needs to be some positive mental states, a degree of shraddha and metta, some sort of positivity to hold the shattering experience that life or reflection might provide. And there needs to be some sort of intensity, which can come through intense study, intense reflection, or life experiences happening. I met another woman years and years ago who seemed to have had an insight experience out of the blue on the top of a London bus. And she wasn't sure what had triggered it, but something had. And when she came to hear the Heart Sutra, she knew that the Heart Sutra was speaking to her experience. She'd heard it before. So Bhante himself, reading the Diamond Sutra and the Sutra of Huineng at 16, an insight seems to have happened that, he'd never consciously, presumably, been taught to meditate, but you look at the intensity of his reflective life from the age of 8, when he was reading everything under the sun and having very, very strong experiences, seems to have precipitated a prajna experience. And then, of course, there's the whole question that you alluded to as to past lives, and what do we bring into this world? What, somebody like Bhante, I find it almost impossible to believe that he wasn't a Buddhist in a previous life, that he hadn't practiced previously, and that what had arisen was a remembering. He alludes to that himself.
There's a remarkable seminar where, I think it's a women's seminar, where Bhante, sometimes at the end of seminars, Bhante opens up and talks more personally. And there's this remarkable seminar where he suddenly talks about study and how, he says, it's just every time I've come to the Dharma, it's felt completely natural to me. He said, even very, very early on, I was having to explain things to my teachers. I just seemed to know it straight away. Insights would come as I studied it. He just seemed to have a very natural gift in that way. And that seemed, and someone said, why do you think that? Because they were asking him, what about meditation, Bhante, and insight? And he said, no, not particularly, more through study. And it's a lovely extract for the seminar. And somebody asked him, why do you think that is? And he said, probably past lives. He said the Dharma always felt familiar to him, like he understood it before he'd even read it. And yeah, he was even very young, explaining some things to his teachers. But it's a very personal little moment where he just talks about insights coming, but not particularly through meditation.
Probably more to explore on that, but let's see if we've got any questions from you people at home across the world. Matti, was that you waving? No, that was you.
I've got a question.
Oh, yes.
So Shantiketu says,
Hi, Shantiketu.
in his talk this morning, Jnanavaca suggested that the truth isn't independent of our minds.
Yeah.
Though I do understand what he's getting at. Might the backside of this be skepticism, subjectivism, relativism, and lack of meaning in postmodernism?
Oh, yeah. So I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear James ask Shantiketu's question? Did you hear? Goodness, I think you're right, Shantiketu. One of the things I think about, even talking about these three myths, and sort of critiquing them and saying each one has strengths, each one has weaknesses, etc., etc. It can lead to a certain sense of relativism, as you say, that nothing's absolutely true, and therefore nothing's really true at all, and you get a kind of pick and mix dharma. And similarly, what I was talking about, you're right. If people, that the mind creates the world, or at least is part of a conditioning factor in whatever arises, can lead to a subjectivism, as you say. And in our postmodern age, there is a tendency to think this is my truth and you have your truth, and there's no absolute truth and no ultimate truth. It's you practice Buddhism, I'll do Hinduism, and so forth. That is a real danger. I think it's a real danger. And do you see that what that danger is classic, it's nihilism. That's the danger of the culture that we live in. I think that sort of relativism is a sort of nihilism. I don't know if you'd agree with that. But on the other hand, there's the other danger of reification and of eternalism. So we are really treading a really fine line. And I think what I was trying to allude to was a sense of wonder that this world that we're in is neither real nor not real. That it's not completely real and it's not completely unreal. That somehow we're involved in creating the world that we experience, and that enlightenment must be a deepening realization of that, and then the world opens up in ways that we can't imagine. That seems to be, if there's a tenor of wonder about it, then I think we're on the right track. But even that can be misinterpreted, can't it? There's so much room for slipping into one or the other, and maybe nihilism's a greater danger for most of us. I don't know if you want to add anything, Shantikettu. You could unmute yourself.
Could I?
I'm happy
See if
with,
Shantikettu has anything.
with wonder and co-creation. That sounds excellent.
Say that again, Shantikettu. I couldn't quite hear.
I'm very content with wonder and co-creation.
Wonder and co-creation. That sounds good, doesn't it? That's good. Well, let's leave it with wonder and co-creation. That's good. Vilasani, was it you that was?
Yes, it was. I want to ask questions about the mind, because I have vascular dementia, and I have series of strokes, and I had the last stroke a month ago, and I was told my brain was very damaged, but I have a mind, and I mean, my mind may also be damaged, but the mind has become what enables me to function, I think. Because they seem to be very separate. One of the things that happens when your brain becomes very damaged is you can lose comprehension. And I wanted to understand what comprehension was in terms of the brain. So I found this wonderful German book on hearing and the mind, I mean the brain. And once the damage I had made it impossible for me to understand human speech, but I could still read. But that still happens. I slip into inability to understand speech. And during this latest meditation, you read that wonderful poem that I love so much about impermanence. And I heard every word and loved every word. The second time you spoke it, I couldn't understand a single word of it. All meaning had gone. And I realized I was feeling fear. I was so afraid. I thought I had overcome my fear of dying, but I haven't. Because I think, I may be wrong, but I think that that's what happened. Fear took over and comprehension. And my brain malfunction.
Right. Goodness, that's so both moving and very, very interesting to hear, Vilasani. And in a way, thank you for sharing that so openly, and thanks for being on this retreat and the courage that you've got to be on this retreat and to keep practicing, and not only to keep practicing, but want to break through into wisdom, into prajna. It's really, I don't know, I just find it humbling actually, and very inspiring, Vilasani, very, very inspiring. I can remember meeting a woman at the LBC, and I'm afraid I've forgotten her name, who was much younger than me. She was probably in her 20s, maybe late 20s, and had a massive stroke, which meant that she lost the power of speech as well for a long time, and her ability to read. She gradually got it back, and it was fascinating hearing her talk, because she'd found different ways of comprehending the world, is all I can say. I can't probably summarize her experience, but I'm also thinking of Bhante when he was ill and suffering from sleep deprivation for, you know, all those months, years. And you went to sit with him, didn't you? And do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, as well, that we use the word mind so easily. We just don't know what the mind is. It's interesting that we're so used to using it, we think we know what we're talking about in a certain sense, and it's deeply mysterious. In philosophy, it's still the big problem. How does all this happen? You can see how neurons fire, and like you were saying, you can see that this part is damaged of the brain and so on. But there's no way of understanding how this world, with its beauties and horrors, can appear to us in this way. We're utterly in the dark about that. But yeah, I was very struck at that time. Bhante was very, very ill, and you know, really, as he was reminding people, not being able to sleep, people torture people in that way. He was sort of being tortured. And I remember he asked me to go and see him. But I was asked. There was a time when they were trying to find people who would go and sit with Bhante, and I was asked if I would go and sit with him. I remember getting there. It was actually around the time of 9/11, because I remember that being very much in the air, and he didn't know about that. And I started talking to him about things, and he said, "I can't think about that now." He was always very careful about what he could put his mind to and whether he was well enough to put his mind to that. And he just said, I can't think about that just now. And I was trying to talk to him for a bit, and then he just gave me a book, which was a symbol to stop talking. So I just sit there and read his book. And he was trying to sort of nod off in the chair. And I'm afraid he was in a terrible state. And it was terribly painful to see Bhante, and he seemed crushed, really, I'm afraid. But as I sat there, he was trying to nod off in the chair, and hadn't slept and was very, very anxious, actually, and very crushed in a way by what was happening to him. Terrible to see him like that. But as I sat there, I became, how I described it later was that it felt like the whole room was full of angels. That's how I'm not usually given to those kind of experiences. I come from the West Midlands, and nobody from the West Midlands of England is allowed to have experiences of angels. But yeah, I experienced the room to be kind of full of beauty, but animated like angels, like packed with angels. It was as if Bhante's mind, to come back to your point, it was as if Bhante's mind was now outside of him, living just as vitally in the room, and he was this kind of not crushed, because of course what we discovered, it was as much as anything to do with the medication he had been given, which was well known for having these side effects, but at least at that moment seemingly crushed. But his mind seemed to be animating the room around him, and I left him feeling incredibly happy and uplifted, and like I'd had this marvelous, I don't know, how you sometimes when you have a wonderful sleep, particularly when you get up to our age, when you just slept really wonderfully and you feel so refreshed afterwards and relieved by it. It was like that when I left, that I had been in touch with something that restored me. But Bhante, meanwhile, was really, really in such a pained state. So who knows what the mind is? But that was my experience. I don't know what it meant, but that was my experience.
Could the mind and subtle consciousness be very similar? I mean, they seem there seems to be so many links between mind and subtle consciousness.
Yeah.
All I would say, I mean, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I do think that I feel very, very confident that the brain isn't all that we are, if you sort of mean that mind consciousness, whatever we want to call it, subtle consciousness, is related to the body, to the brain, but isn't limited by it. I'm interested in the sort of theory that the brain acts as a sort of receiver, rather like a, I don't know, television acts as a receiver, or radio acts as a receiver, but that doesn't mean that the radio waves are generated by the radio. Does that make sense? But maybe we'll move on.
Yeah,
Thank you, Vilasani. Let's see if there's any more questions. We've probably got time for one.
So Virya City would like to ask a question.
Where's Virya City? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I just maybe it's an observation or a question just on the meditation that we just did. I hadn't done that before, so but I found actually quite a lot of tension. It's sort of like if we're sort of looking for anicca or sort of impermanence in our experience, and yet that I found I was trying to hold my awareness kind of stable. So we're looking for sort of instability in our experience in the body, the Vedana, the thoughts or whatever, and yet then we're trying to, you know, the awareness is trying to be stable. So is there a conflict there between, you know, your awareness being stable, trying to be stable? I found the tension anyway, and then looking for instability in your experience.
Yeah, thank you, Virasity. I think there's a real danger in this particular type of practice, which does seem to generate a tightness and a tension, because, as you say, you're trying to, you know, stay with moment to moment change, and if we're not careful, that does seem to tighten us. In the meditation just now, I noticed that at times I was tightening, and then I remembered, I mean, I should have said this, to sort of broaden and sort of look for both a sort of ease, but also come back to a sense of, it wasn't exactly beauty, but it was a sense of sort of pleasure or wonder. And that seemed to then broaden me. I was thinking of the Animitta Samadhi, and the Animitta Samadhi, of course, it can't be a sense of tightness. It must, but it does seem to include a sense of wonder, which arises presumably from seeing that things are so much in flux that saying that something is, labeling it as a table or a chair or body or is just doesn't apply when you see the flux of things. But there must be a sense of ease in that samadhi, I would have thought. So I don't really know what to advise you, apart from, if you notice that tension, to broaden the awareness and relax, and come back to, I think, a sense of the heart, because it needs to be a heart truth, not a concentration exercise.
I think what I found when I've when I do that practice is that if you're not careful, you can try and keep up with the pace of change. I think that's what creates the tension. Like, you know, like you're literally trying to keep up with change. And it's that when I try to create the tension, if you can just remind yourself you don't need to do that, you can't do that. You can't, because there's no things that change. It's not there, it is, and then it's not, and then there's the next thing, and then it's not. But I think for me, that's what created the tension. It's like you try and track the changingness and keep with it in it. And I think it's probably a sort of species of literalism. Of course, you can't actually do that. You're just tuning into the changingness of it as best as you can. But I think that's what I got into, is trying to keep up with the pace of change almost. Like now. And then that creates a terrible sort of tension if you try and do that. Yeah.
Does that help?
Okay. No, yeah, that's helpful. I'll try that. Yep. Thank you.
Great. Very good. So I think, unless there's any more burning questions, we'll leave it there for now. Is that? Yeah. Okay, very good. So let's have another couple of minutes just to break, and then we'll come back and do another meditation. It'll be a shortish one. Okay. So just a minute or two. Okay, we're back. So what we'll do is we'll have a period of just sitting for about 20 minutes or so, and you're welcome to either just sit, or if you feel you want to, you could try that meditation again of looking for change, or you might feel that actually the heart needs more, you know, to open more and focus on metta or shraddha, or you might just want to sit with your experience. I'll leave it just as an open set. What I will do is I'll read some Zen poems, one at the beginning, one at the end, one by Ryokan and one by Anzan Hoshin. Okay, so settling down. I'm so aware that it's all unreal. One by one, the things of this world pass on. But why do I still grieve? Just sitting. Smoke waved from an incense stick 1,000 years ago brings tears to the eye. Good. So hopefully see you again in a few hours' time, 4:30 UK time.